A security guard working for the Chinese Consulate in Los Angeles pepper-sprayed peaceful protesters on January 4, 2026, and within hours, LAPD officers arrested him on American soil. Not detained, not questioned, arrested. This wasn't supposed to happen. Chinese consulate security personnel typically operate with an assumption of protection, shielded by diplomatic premises and international law. Yet this guard, employed by JK Patrol SVC, a private security contractor, now faces potential felony charges, carrying up to 3 years in prison under California Penal Code 22810. The incident lasted less than 60 seconds. The legal and diplomatic fallout could reverberate for years. In this video, we'll explore how a routine protest outside a Chinese diplomatic facility became a flashpoint exposing the collision between two fundamentally opposed views of free speech, the precise legal boundaries of diplomatic immunity, and why this seemingly minor confrontation represents something far more significant. We're going to examine this incident by exploring what actually happened on January 4th and why LAPD made an immediate arrest. The stark contrast between how speech and protest are treated in the United States versus China. The specific criminal charges this security guard faces and why diplomatic immunity doesn't apply. And we'll conclude by looking at what this means for the future of diplomatic relations and the protection of democratic freedoms on American soil. Let's start with the facts. On January 4th, a security guard working for JK Patrol SVC pepper-sprayed peaceful pro-democracy protesters outside the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles. The protesters, Chinese nationals living in America who opposed the Chinese Communist Party, had gathered to demonstrate against China's support for authoritarian regimes, specifically the Maduro government in Venezuela. According to eyewitness accounts, the security guard approached protesters standing in the public area outside the consulate and deployed pepper spray without provocation. LAPD officers detained at least one guard at the scene. The protesters were exercising rights foundational to American democracy, freedom of speech and peaceful assembly, both protected by the First Amendment. What makes this significant is the speed of the LAPD response. American law enforcement didn't wait for diplomatic negotiations or defer to the Chinese consulate. Officers made an immediate tactical decision. This was criminal assault on American soil, and it would be treated as such. That decision represents a clear statement about where American law draws the line, and that line doesn't move, even when foreign governments are involved. The protesters outside the Chinese consulate possessed a right that simply doesn't exist in the country they fled. In the United States, the First Amendment guarantees that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. This isn't theoretical. The Supreme Court has determined these protections extend to public property, streets, sidewalks, parks, which are traditional public forums where speech restrictions face the highest constitutional scrutiny. When you stand on a public sidewalk in Los Angeles and criticize any government, you're exercising what the Supreme Court calls among the most protected forms of expression in American law. Now contrast this with China. Although the Chinese constitution declares citizens enjoy freedom of speech, these freedoms are tightly restricted. What Article 35 gives, Article 51 takes away, stating citizens may not exercise rights in ways that infringe upon the interests of the state. What does this mean in practice? According to Freedom House, China has become home to one of the world's most restrictive media environments and its most sophisticated system of censorship. The government's ability to monitor communications has increased dramatically. Freedom of expression in China is essentially a privilege granted only to a free speech elite, senior officials, those with official patronage, and select academics. For ordinary Chinese citizens who criticize the government, consequences are severe. Artists and activists have been arrested on charges of picking quarrels and provoking trouble, insulting revolutionary heroes, or subversion of state power. These vague charges result in prison sentences ranging from months to over a decade. In Hong Kong, Following the National Security Ordinance, people have been convicted and sentenced to 10 to 14 months in prison for wearing a t-shirt with protest slogans, making political comments online, or writing protest slogans on bus seats. This isn't ancient history. In September 2023, China proposed an amendment that would have criminalized comments, clothing, or symbols that hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. After backlash, it was narrowed. But even the version that took effect in June 2025 prohibits clothes that glorify wars of aggression. The protesters outside the Los Angeles Consulate understood this reality intimately. Many fled China precisely because expressing these views at home could result in imprisonment, torture, or worse. They came to America because they believed democratic soil would protect their right to speak. The security guard who pepper sprayed them operated under a different assumption, that Chinese rules governing speech could be enforced on Los Angeles streets. He was wrong. The security guard arrested by LAPD faces serious criminal exposure under California law, and diplomatic immunity won't save him. Here's why. Under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, consular officers have functional immunity only for acts performed in the exercise of consular functions. But this security guard isn't even a consular employee. He works for JK Patrol SVC, a private security contractor. He has zero immunity of any kind. So what charges does he face? Under California Penal Code Section 22,810, using pepper spray in non-self-defense situations can result in misdemeanor or felony charges, with sentences of 364 days in jail for a misdemeanor or 16 months, 2 years, or 3 years for a felony. California law is explicit. Pepper spray use must be justified for self-defense from personal injury or death, and the force must be reasonable. An individual cannot lawfully spray someone because they say something obscene or because their appearance was frightening. If someone is the aggressor, they do not have justifiable reason to use the spray. This guard was the aggressor. The protesters stood on public property, engaging in constitutionally protected speech. No reasonable self-defense claim exists. The prosecution's case is straightforward. California treats unlawful use of tear gas as assault and can charge it as a felony or misdemeanor depending on the facts, the defendant's prior record, and prosecutorial discretion. If charged as a felony, punishment involves a minimum of 16 months in state prison to a maximum of 3 years. Beyond state charges, the security guard could face federal civil rights violations. When someone acting under color of authority, even private security employed by a foreign consulate, deprives people of constitutional rights, federal prosecutors can pursue charges under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Given the high-profile nature of this incident, federal involvement is likely. The contrast with how China handles similar situations couldn't be starker. When protesters gather outside American diplomatic facilities in Beijing, Chinese security forces routinely detain them without charge, and American diplomats have no recourse under Chinese law. But that's the point. This isn't China. On American soil, American law applies, even when it's inconvenient for foreign governments. This brings us to the central tension: diplomatic relations versus democratic principles. The Chinese government will almost certainly demand the security guard's release, framing his arrest as a violation of the Vienna Convention. China's foreign ministry has a well-established pattern of describing protesters as troublemakers who illegally entered diplomatic premises and endangered security. The United States faces a choice. Option 1. Treat this as a standard criminal case, prosecute according to California law, and accept whatever diplomatic friction results. This upholds the rule of law and sends a clear message that political dissidents will be protected on American soil. The cost is diplomatic tension with China at a time when the bilateral relationship is already strained over Taiwan, trade, and human rights. Option 2. Allow diplomatic pressure to influence prosecution, perhaps resulting in dropped charges, a plea deal with minimal consequences, or slow-walking the case until media attention fades. This preserves smooth diplomatic relations. The cost is a chilling effect on political dissidents who fear they're not truly safe even in America, and a precedent that emboldens similar conduct. Option 3, perhaps most likely, is a middle path. Prosecutors move forward with charges, secure a conviction or plea, but then negotiate the guard's deportation as part of sentencing. This allows both governments to claim partial victory while avoiding worst-case scenarios. The broader implications extend beyond this single case. US law enforcement officials have repeatedly warned about aggressive and criminal efforts by Beijing to stalk, harass, and intimidate political dissidents in the US, a pattern known as transnational repression. The Justice Department has brought multiple cases against operatives working on behalf of the Chinese government. If the US allows this case to be resolved quietly without meaningful consequences, it signals to Beijing that transnational repression, while officially condemned, won't face serious legal penalties. If prosecutors pursue the case aggressively and secure a conviction, it establishes a precedent that could deter future incidents. So a security guard pepper-sprayed peaceful protesters outside the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles, and LAPD arrested him within hours. After examining the legal framework, the free speech divide between democracies and authoritarian states, and the pattern of similar incidents, we can see this wasn't just another protest gone wrong. This incident wasn't about pepper spray. It's about whether democratic freedoms end where diplomatic premises begin. It's about whether people who fled authoritarian governments can truly exercise the rights America promises. And it's about whether the United States will defend those principles even when it creates diplomatic friction. The security guard chose to enforce Chinese rules on American streets against protesters exercising American rights. He now faces consequences under American law, up to 3 years in prison. Private contractors don't get diplomatic immunity, constitutional rights don't disappear near consulates, and assault is assault regardless of who employs you. This matters because the Chinese government, like other authoritarian regimes, has demonstrated clear willingness to export its approach to dissent beyond its borders. Each incident tests whether democratic nations will defend their principles or defer to diplomatic convenience. The answer will determine whether political dissidents can safely exercise their rights on democratic soil, or whether the space for free speech continues to shrink, consulate by consulate, incident by incident. But what do you think? Should the United States prioritize protecting protesters' First Amendment rights, even if it creates serious diplomatic tension with China? Or is there a way to balance democratic principles with the practical reality of international relations? Make sure to subscribe for more hard-hitting analysis, in-depth assessments, and breaking coverage of where geopolitics meets the rule of law. The confrontations that test democratic principles against authoritarian ambitions, right here on American streets.